evening, everybody. About 5:30 or so on Thursday, the 21st of March. Happy spring. And I have been working a while. I had my father-in-law over here again giving me a hand with gaps. And we didn't touch the driver's side door at all. I think that's about as good as I'm going to get. We did play with the passenger side door, and though I'm not ecstatic about it, I'm pretty happy with how it is. Again, you got that gap at the top there, and the guys on the favorite forum said that that's typical. Happy with the gap going down. I would like it to come up forward just a little bit, but that's it's not playing with me. And this is a little high up here, but again, I got to get my gap down here, and if you can tell there, it's kind of sunk in a little bit, and it's a little bit proud still down here, but not as bad as it was. And horrible to see that down there, but there's just a little bit of space in there. So definitely the best that I've had it, but by no means perfect, but by every means probably good enough. But to get back to the bonnet stay thing that I posted a video the other night, I think what I got going on here is I have a feeling I cleaned this piece up. This is from the black car, based on how that looks, and the bend there that you see, it comes in straight and then bends down pretty good. I have a feeling this may have been repaired at some point, and you can see that this one doesn't bend like that, and also that extra collar there kind of leads me to believe that it broke and they tried to stick the pipe inside of a pipe and fix it, and it's also a different length, and it's also twisted. If that is true, they didn't do a real bang up job. But anyway, I cleaned up the bent tube, so to speak, and I have that as well. I tried to bend Dorothy's tube, and I couldn't do it. I don't really have the up tube bender for that size. So I'm going to use Dorothy's pivot tube here on the bottom tube, and then use the black car's angled one and try to mix and match here and see if that works. But I want to get this knocked out real quick and grab a bite to eat, and then I'll show you a little bit more on the gap work. All right, that didn't work at all. And now putting it back, it's just, it's messing with my head. So I'm not gonna play with the bonnet stay anymore. I'm sick of it. I may look into ordering new ones from Rimmers, because these are beat up. I mean, they're all bent and everything like that. But anyway, keeping the faith. So I'm gonna move back to playing around here after a bite to eat. So here's the joy that is aligning the bonnet gaps. I know I haven't really tried to give you guys any tips or pointers or anything for the gaps, and frankly it's because I don't know what I'm doing, and I don't want to give you bum dope information and have you running and saying, you know, well, that's going to work and all that kind of stuff. But here you can see that this gap between the bonnet and the front sail plate, or whatever you want to call that there, is pretty tight. Come over to the passenger side, and you look, and it's wide open. I can stick my whole fingertip in there. So then you would think, well, that's easy. You just have to tilt the bonnet forward over there and push it back a little bit here, and you're all good to go. Well, probably on any other thing except the Triumph Spitfire, that would work. If you look, however, look at this line. That line's almost perfect. Look at that line between the wheel arch and the front of the sill. Almost perfect. It is perfect. I just don't want to say that it's perfect. Same thing over here. Not as much light over here, but if you can see, that line goes almost all the way straight, and this line is pretty near straight. So what do you do in that case? Well, what you can do is adjust the height of the bonnet at these pivot points up here. So this one would have to come down. That would cause this end of the bonnet to come down, hopefully opening up this gap. And this end of the bonnet over here would have to come up, the top bolt there, and hopefully close that gap. Now what that does is then starts to throw off the vertical alignment here. Now this gap over here is not huge, but it's big, but off the door, not off of the sail plate. So I'm going to try to do this. I'm going to loosen up over here, push down, and try to open that gap up there. I think the problem I'm going to have, though, is I'm about as far down on this one as I can be. I might get a little bit out of it, but I got a lot of room to lift up over there. So I'll loosen these guys up and I'll see if I can get them to play. All right, so we'll loosen this top bolt here. Now I should be able to lift up and push down, but this one doesn't like to play for some reason with lifting up and pushing down, even though I've tried to lubricate it. And I think it's just because it's jammed. This guy has got it pinched, for lack of a better idea there, which means I got to loosen these two pivot bolts. Well, that means that I'm going to lose that adjustment. So if you haven't figured out that this is not only frustrating, but a pain in the rear, you will. Alright, so now I got movement of that, but I got to push it down. Well, that's as far down as I can get it. That didn't really open that gap up, but now I should be able to roll that hinge forward. Alright, so I opened up that hinge a little bit. Gap looks pretty good now. Got lucky there. And actually the front of the bonnet doesn't look too bad either. But I like the gap up there, so I'm going to tighten this puppy down. Alright. So that's tight. So now we've got to try to close this gap up over here. So I got the cone height that needs to get adjusted a little bit. But the way that I'm going to try to do this, and the only way I can do this, is to roll, either to lift the bonnet or to push it back. Well, I can't push it back any further. It's up against its hard stop. So I'm going to have to lift a little bit. When I lift a little bit, I'm going to close up some gap here, so we'll see what happens. Alright, so now I'll show you. So that closed up pretty well there. Still aligned front to back, but now look at the size of the gap here. Alright, this is huge, which would tell me I need to push it back down. Well, I just lifted it up. Damn it. So, are you frustrated with me yet? The problem with props. It's amazing that one little piece of metal can screw something up. Now, I didn't adjust anything, and I just took the prop out. And this gap was real close, maybe 2 or 3 millimeters. And now it's probably almost a centimeter. This was almost perfectly aligned, and now it's off. Same thing with everything. So regardless, it seems to be, of whether or not I put the struts in, or whether or not I put the regular bonnet stay in, I'm having problems. So, no struts. I should have left it out, but I'm trying to get the gap set the way that I'm going to put the car together. So I need to come through that at some future date. If I order a new prop rod from Rimmers, something, or just go back to the struts and fight them or something, I haven't decided yet. But I'm going to continue on with the gaps. Now they're all messed up again, and I'm going to try to adjust some stuff. Though it's interesting to note that the gap in the center, which was pretty nasty, is now not as bad. I still don't know how to lower that. I guess I'll just set these gaps without any bonnet prop up ability and go from there. I can't begin to tell you how frustrating this is. Played with the bonnet some more. It wasn't where I wanted it, so it's not like I shot myself in the foot. But I'll show you now what I'm looking at. So all of a sudden that little gap is back. And I'm sure it's just all to playing with the hinges and all that kind of stuff. And that one's okay. A little tighter of a gap there than it really should be, but it's okay. And the bulge in the center is probably the worst that it's been. So what I'm going to do now is, it's about 7:45 or so. I'm going to essentially call it playing with the bonnet, just be done with that. I'm going to play with this door a little bit and put non-drilled out hinges back on it. And just to see if maybe I'm gonna, be able to get this in. Played with these hinges for a little bit, and I'm no longer convinced that I need to drill them out. I was using these, what are these things even called? Little like mini pry bar things, and just kind of sticking them underneath to try to get my gap down there, using making them like extra hands. And I got a pretty good amount of play in the nut plate there, and probably could come back a little bit with the door. You can see it's starting to get marked up here. So that's that'll be fun because that's a good chunk. And I still got problems with clearance down here, but I think I can get this in without having to drill out these hinges. Overall, frustrating evening. Not really any further than I was when I got here. And as a matter of fact, I might be back a little bit now because I want to revisit this door. So, but I got to come through this. I want to get this stuff, at least my head around it, and a strong path ahead for when I've got paint on here. Otherwise, I'm going to do to my pretty red paint, assuming that I put it on properly, what I'm doing right now to my pretty gray primers. So that's it. That's all I got for tonight. I'll be here Saturday. Morning, everybody. It's about 8:45 or so. Saturday, the 23rd of March. I'm in a better mood, so I apologize for my frustration and melancholy that I displayed in the previous clips. I'm going to start all over, loosen everything back up, including the bonnet, including the pivot tubes, whatever. The only thing that's going to stay is the boot. And this time, instead of the bonnet, I'm going to start with the doors. And I did some studying, asked for some help, some tips and tricks and stuff like that. So I'm going to try to follow along with that stuff and see how it goes. And I'll try to keep you in the loop a little bit better with how I'm doing it. And who knows, maybe I'll get lucky and it'll actually turn into an instructional video that's worth it. So we'll see. So I have the door back off, and in here are the nut plates, or something called something like that. I'll call them nut plates. And essentially they're just threaded hunks of metal in there, and that's the other side that the door goes to. So I want to make sure that I've got a good freedom of motion here to allow for an even adjustment. So you can see the larger holes into the A-post, like this guy up here, that would be into the A-post. And then obviously you've got threaded areas in there. So all I try to do is thread a bolt inside to the nut plate, bolt or two, and make sure I have full freedom of motion inside the that area bounded by those circles to try to give me as much adjustment possible as I can get. On the back side, there's just little tabs that kind of hold that nut plate in place so that it doesn't fall out, obviously. So if I can go all the way down with it, the nut itself, or the bolt itself, I mean, touches the circle, and I can kind of make my way all around. Put another guy up in the top here just so I can have a little bit easier to move stuff around. So I can go all the way forward just about. Now I don't have full motion that way with it, and probably most importantly, that's about all I've got going vertical with it. And you can see this right here, hopefully you can see that, is right in the center. So I'm losing, I don't know, 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch, about 1/8 of an inch vertical adjustment right there. And that speaks to the problem I'm having down on the sill where the door is touching the sill. If I do the bottom, you can kind of see that it's a lot better of a rotation in there. Can't go quite as far forward as I would like, but I don't think I need to move the door any further forward. The other side I'm having that problem. So I got to figure out why I can't go up. Either the tab is stopping it or the nut bar is in the way or something. I don't know. I didn't really do any work over here except replacing that check strap, and that didn't really get in there at all. Alright, so there's no access from the top of the A-post in the back for the top hinge plate. You can get to the bottom, but you can't get to the top. It's all sealed off up there. And there's a strengthener plate internal here that runs right here that bounds the check strap thing, the housing. I think that was what I taken out a while ago when I had to replace that broken check strap. But I used a very small punch, I'll get it on screen there for you, and kind of jammed it up into here. You can just barely see the top little clip that holds the thing in place and just allows it, just keeps it in a general area. And I was able to stuff this punch in here and kind of bang that in a little bit. And I got pretty good motion up there. So it can't go all the way forward and all the way up top. But again, I think I'm pretty happy with the way this door fits back to front. So hopefully that bought me some room there. So anyway, there it is. And now I am going to continue on. I pulled the rubber seal out just because I don't want it interfering in any way. I don't want to have to fight that thing. I will, obviously, when I'm all done. I'm still using, I think I had mentioned before, I bought used hinges, but that were in good shape from Rimmer. Turns out Roadster Factory's having the hinges on sale, so I decided last night to go ahead and pull the trigger and just buy all new hinges. They are British Motor Heritage hinges from what I understand, so they'll be quality. And I just want to remove the hinge possibilities from it. But I do think that the hinges that I have now probably were good enough. But at 20 bucks a hinge, I figured it was worth the investment. So what I'm going to do here is I've got some paint sticks. And what I did was I got a couple here taped together with some duct tape, trying to get about 5 millimeters. This is probably a little bit thicker than 5 millimeters right now, but it's about as close as I can get it. And I'm going to lay these paint sticks. This is from a video that I found on YouTube. Chris Kraft, I think the gentleman's name was. He was restoring an American muscle car. I don't remember. I'm not into American muscle cars. And also a gentleman on the SPI forum had mentioned this. So I'm just going to put these stir sticks in kind of strategic places here along the bottom of the door jamb to try to help provide support to the door to give me my gap, and then along here on the B post, which is going to be a little bit tricky because there's not a whole lot of long space here, and just try to tape these up and get these set so that I can use them as tools to try to help me get this thing aligned. Alright, so I got these pieces down here just kind of resting there. I'm going to try to put one piece here and one piece here just to kind of give me down the B post. Now you do obviously, they're not going to stick there magically. Trying to find a nice level place that it's relatively straight. So all I'm going to do is just grab some tape and tape it up there. All right. Now I'll take the door and I'll just set the door in here, and I'm going to click it in on the latch. Now the latch is just free floating right now. So once I get it clicked in, I'm hoping that these bottom support down in here, these shims in here, will not let the drawer drop too far. Otherwise I'm going to have to play with the latch a little bit so that I can get it set vertically and then be able to look over here at the height. Another thing I've learned with the door too is, and it's a hard habit to break, is when I manhandle the door around, I've been tending to grab it by the handle. And if you remember, I had to do a lot of body work around the handle to make them sit flat to the door again, and I was actually pretty proud of myself. So I'm tending to screw myself over in trying to bend the things again. So just watch when you're handling the doors that you try not to grab it by the handle. Another thing too is you've got the little catches here for the check strap. So sometimes when you put the door in, that'll interfere. It goes into that little recess in here where the check strap is. So sometimes you got to put the door in kind of at an angle and then tend to close it a little bit. Also, the hinges on the door are completely loose. So that's got full range of motion there. Alright, so essentially those shims, even though they're in there and they're about 5 millimeters, obviously the distance between the sill and the bottom of the door is going to be much greater than that. So I've got a whole bunch of stir sticks over there. I think all I'll do now is I'll just start plussing those shims up until I get about 5 millimeters on the door. These back here are getting all messed with and everything, so I'm going to pull those off, and I'll come back at it and see how we're going to do this. As a side note, I had a little epiphany real quick. I just did the same thing with the latch plate. There's the same nut plate set up back here that you can adjust. I just did the same thing, stuck a screw in there, made sure I had full range of motion on the nut plate, and I do. So you can see how wide the gap is at the bottom there. So that's pretty good, and actually it's a little bit too much, though it's really close with this line. But I was surprised. I probably have a stack about that thick. I'll pull them out here in a second and show you. A huge stack of these little stir sticks that I bought. These little craft sticks. I got these from Walmart for like $3 or something like that. I use them to stir paint. All I'm doing is stack them together and taping them and compressing them so they provide a shim. But I'm surprised how many there are in there. But I got a stack here. I'll make another even stack in the back here to try to get it just to help me lift this door up a little bit. I'll show you what that looks like. So you can see how thick that is. That's a good centimeter or so distance between the bottom of the door on where it rests here on the sill and the sill itself. So I'll probably pull 1 or 2 of these out and then stack them up about the same on the other side. Make another stack of them so I can put them down at the end here, and hopefully that'll be enough. So I got the 2 sets of shims in there, and that's pretty close to being good. I kind of lose it a little bit down here. Can't really see it. The camera angle needs to be really low, but it opens up a little bit down here, so I may pull a slat out of that. But this crease line in the back here lines up pretty good, and the crease line up front here lines up, man, real close, if not perfect. Got a little piece of tape back here to just try to hold the door in a little bit. So that looks good as far as I'm concerned about where it sits. So now the trick is going to be, I'll pull the slat out back here and drop that down a little bit. I'll take measurements of how thick those 2 shims are, so that'll give you an idea if you're trying to do this on how thick those need to be. And I also, I'll show you, it's got to get shoved under the door a little bit to bolster it up. I'll show you that. But, so now the trick is going to be if the shims are actually going to line up or not. Or excuse me, if the hinges are actually going to line up or not. Alright, so I got these hinges, or excuse me, the shims taped up. They're pretty thin. Stir sticks are cheesy. So if you can kind of see that they warped a little bit, so I tried to tape them as tight as I could. So I got a piece at the front that's about 10.4 millimeters thick or so. So if you're going to make your own, maybe out of more sturdier stir sticks or something like that, you can get an idea about how thick I'm running. And then about 8.6 millimeters or so on the back that's just measured with my cheapo micrometer. So now I'll put these back up and I'll try to get these set and go from there. And like I had mentioned, these do have to sit, if you have them sit on all the way in the back up against the where the seal slides onto, the door will tend to fall and not sit up. So I'm trying to put these towards the front here. You don't really have to tape them in, I found, because you can get your fingers in here enough from the back, especially since the rubber seal is in here, and kind of push these under and bolster the door up a little bit. So I'm not going to worry about taping them. Again, trying not to grab it by the door handle. Just get this thing up here, click it in the back. You can hear that click, hopefully. Adjust the shims. Alright, so the door is rested on the shims there. Good clearances as far as I'm concerned, all the way front to back. It's a little high up here towards the windscreen area, but I'm not going to really worry about that, at least not right now. Move it forward just a bit. Now what I'm doing now is I would like this a little bit opened up a little bit more. So I've got the shim, and you can, I don't know if you can see that too well. Try to zoom in for you here. My eyeball is telling me that this crease and this crease, the door is just a smidge low. So I'm going to push the piece of wood shim that I've got in here, the piece of wood shim I have down at the bottom, I'm going to try to push it this way a little bit. That sill will start to curve up, and I'm hoping that I'll take advantage of that curve a little bit and get the door to lift just a little bit. Alright, I'm happy with that in the front. Wow, really happy with that in the back. If anything, that's a little tight in the back, but I've got a gap everywhere. And then obviously, I can't remember if I pointed this out or not. The door and the B-post don't have the same angle, don't have the same approach, I guess you could say, especially towards the top. This B-post actually isn't as bad, but I'll show you the passenger side if and when I get over there today. and show you that the B post goes up much more vertically than the door does. This one is actually not as horrible. But I spoke with a gentleman on my favorite forum who said he bought his GT6 he bought his brand new, and it was the same exact way. Those gaps had always opened up. So anyway, as far as I'm concerned, the gaps are set around the door, and actually I'm happy with the way the gaps look just about everywhere. The door sits in a little bit here. I don't know if you can really see that, but probably better from this way. You can see that the door sits in a little bit, but I'm sitting good. It's nice and smooth on the bottom, towards the bottom. So I'm happy with where the door is sitting that way. So I'm gonna play with the striker plate just a little bit here, I think. But I want to get some hinges in and see if I can't get those things set up to at least try to get the door semi-attached. All right, so again, you've got the hinges need to obviously go on the door, and the hinges are free floating in the door right now. So everything is loose, and obviously the door is not attached. There's not really anything else I can do to get the door kind of in there for me. It's already attached on the back latch, so I'm just going to go ahead and bend these hinges in and see if I can get any screws started. And I want to use my shims here, and if the shins end up being too thick, then I'm okay with that. I'll use, I either won't use them at least now, or I'll look at using something else. Just as a point of reference, shims are about 1.2 millimeters or so, so not that thick, but who knows. All right, so just putting the hinges up without attaching anything, and I know these angles aren't the best for what I want to try to show you. The door or the hinge sits flush against the A post, which is good. And the door hasn't really moved on me. As a matter of fact, the door can even come out a little bit down here, which is good, again, as far as I'm concerned. So now I'm going to put a drift in there and see if I can get the screw holes all the way up and see them, if I gave myself enough room on the adjustments on those bolts. And it looks like I have, or it's going to be real close if I haven't. Alright, so those are, the top one should come in. I'll look at the bottom one now. Looks like I'm going to have enough room there too. Now again, if anything, I've got a little bit of extra wiggle room down here. I don't believe I'm going to run into the problem that I had down at the very bottom that's off screen right now to get that to catch. So now let's see if I put these gaskets in here, if they're going to mess me up at all. I brought the door out just a little bit at the bottom here, but I think that's about just a little bit that I want. Alright, so those guys are started. Put the gasket in the top here. Alright, that pushed the door out just a little bit, but not a whole lot. And actually the back now is pretty aligned. Find my bolt holes here. Here we go. I think this is going to be the big test. Alright, so I've got all the bolts started. Gaps look good along the bottom, at least it's not touching down there. When I say good, the door is still a little sunk in at the bottom. In the front, actually looks really good at the back. Wish I could latch or tighten up that latch plate back there right now, but I'm afraid to touch anything because it's set. It does sit a little proud up at the very top here near the windscreen. It's off camera. So, but anyway, I think I'm okay with that. So now what I think I'm going to try to do is tighten these hinges up. Door really can't come back any further. Tighten the hinges up on the B-post, and then try to pull the back, or excuse me, the bottom out just a tad, which hopefully will be from the hinge points that are attached to the door. And then I think, holy cow, I think that might be, I might get lucky and have it good. Now, again, as I said in the blog, I think, and as I've said on some forum posts and everything, a lot of times you'll tighten up something somewhere, and 8 feet away something moves, especially with that darn bonnet. So tightening these up may cause the door to adjust a little bit as that hinge really comes in with solid contact on the B-post. I don't really see anything moving right now. The door might have come out a little bit at the back, but that's okay because the striker plate should really be the one taking care of that. I'm using a little 1/4-inch drive here socket because the extension's a little thinner. Prevents me from gouging into the door. I've done that enough. All right, so now the vertical height of that door should be set and the front back should be set. So now, yep, just pull it out just a little bit. You can see, you can't see it now maybe, but I was able to pull it out just a little bit. Get this guy to flush up. You can see that. That'll pivot. Here, let me show you, see if I can zoom in and show you that a little bit. So again, I got the door hinges tight on the B-post, and you can kind of see how that's rolling in and out there. All that is these nuts and bolts. There's one screw in the center that's hidden. It's right about here behind the hinge, and then you got the 2 nuts, and that just allows you to roll the door in and out. And that's pretty good where that is. I'll try to tighten this up. This is another one where when you tighten these up, it'll really start to move the door because the door will draw itself in towards the front of the car a little bit, especially if they were really loose, like I think I had them. Yeah. Had these real loose. Yeah, so I think the door is going to have to come back here. Slide it back. Yeah, so the door is too far forward right now, and it's going to be tricky because the gap in the back is already pretty tight. So I'm going to, again, the fore to aft motion is on the hinges on the B-post, not the hinges on the door. So I'm going to have to loosen those up and try to get this thing to slide back just a tad. To open that up, I only need about 1 millimeter or so, and that's really all I got back there. This is the sill in the front of the door here. As I open the door, you can see it just rubs into that. I can't have that. And I lost the ability to close the door on the back. I'm not quite sure why that happened. Just I think it's too far back. So I'll put these, my little shims fell out too. I'll put those back in and see if I can't get the door to slide back for me just a little bit. I pulled the striker plate out because I think it's going to interfere with my ability to push the door back since it came out of alignment. I couldn't shut it anymore. Again, I'm not trying to loosen this up, not much. I don't really want it to fall. All right, not happy with the gap at the front here. So I'm going to loosen everything back up, put the striker plate back on, see if I can get the gap reset. All right, I think I got the door set again. I'll show you the gaps here. So I've opened that one up. That's what is kind of important to me. Gap along the bottom here. It's a little tight, but it still, I think, has enough. I think it has enough clearance to open. I may try to jack the door up just a little bit. Pretty good along the bottom here. Pretty good along here. And it's sitting a little proud right now. so I want to try to roll it in. I got the latch plate in there, but it might be a little crooked. It might fall. If you can kind of see that gap, it kind of seems to open up as it drops down a little bit, but it's pretty close even if it does do that. So everything is loose, but nothing is so loose that I think it's going to mess it up as I tighten it down. Kind of learned that lesson a little bit just a couple tries ago. But this is a solid 5 millimeters all the way down until you start to make the curve there. All right, trying to get everything snug, but not so tight that it tightens one side up before the other side gets snug. Now another option I have here, in case I can't get, I want this to open up more, is I can put, on the door side, I can put washers in there to try to move the door back while keeping the hinges stationary as a spacer. But I'm afraid if I do that, I'm going to lose my gap at the back because it's not very big. All right, happy with the front, happy with the gap here and here. But the back is recessed quite a bit, and that should all hopefully be taken care of by the striker plate. So I'm going to play with the striker plate a little bit. I'll show you that. You can see how badly that's recessed there, but I think if I move the striker plate just out, if you look, that the vertical portion is pretty good. I think if I move the striker plate just straight out, hopefully I can correct that. So I'll play with that for a little bit and come back and show you hopefully success. All right, well, I said hopefully, and I guess hope worked in this case. Real happy with this up here. If anything, the door could be rotated just a smidge. It sinks in a little bit here, but then it levels, or it stays pretty sunk in here. But it's good as far as the level goes along the bottom, as far as being proud or not. And it just sticks out just a tad here. I could probably come just a little bit more forward or out with the striker plate, but I don't think I have any more room. And all those hinges came in good over here. And the clearance, I'll show you here, hopefully you'll be able to see it. The clearance is nothing, essentially just barely doesn't touch. But it shuts pretty well. If you can see, it will rise up a little bit as it shuts. See if I can show you that. I don't know if you saw that. I'll do a super slow-mo maybe. But it does rise up a little bit as it hits the striker plate and shuts. I can feel just a smidge of movement in the hinges, so maybe I'll get lucky with the new hinges and that'll take that out of there. But I don't think I'm going to get any better than this without totally racking my brains out and wanting to hurt myself. So success on this side. The shims work from the bottom. I didn't end up using any shims around the sides or anything. One, they were very hard to get to stay in place, and two, I just didn't really need to do them. It's about 10:30 right now, so I worked on that door for about an hour. So that's I'll take that. I've got the paper in both the front hinges and in the striker plate, so that's a data point. I'm going to put the rubber in there now and see how the rubber sits and see if the door seals all the way around. Looking at it, it should, but you never know. Well, I put the rubber on and accepted the extremities. Quite frankly, it doesn't seal up worth a damn. I think you can maybe see the gap there between the door and the rubber. Let's see. I'll have the what's it called on there? The door card on there. That'll add, I don't know, 1/4 of an inch or so. So hopefully that'll be enough. But there's definitely, I mean, I'm absolutely really happy with this gap down here. I mean, it may be able to come in a little bit, but then I'm just going to sink it in down here and sink it in up here because those are low spots on the door. So I don't really have any intention of moving that. And I'm also happy with how tight the gap is up here. Again, that could probably come out a little bit, but I'm not too concerned. So as far as I'm concerned, this door is done. Still have to figure out how I'm going to mark all this stuff, but I'm happy with where this door sets right now. So now I will go to the other side. I don't think I'll record it for you since you're probably about ready to gouge your eyes out with these machinations here. But if I come across anything amazing over there, I'll point it out to you. But I'll spend the next hour or so on the other door and see if I get as lucky. And then on to the beast. No real surprises on the passenger's door. This gap is pretty wide here. Not crazy about that, but don't know that I have a whole lot of choice there. The other thing that's happening, as I ran into these same problems before, is it's proud of the sill down here, but it lines up pretty good in here. It's even, and then it sneaks in, and then it's even again. I mean, I might be able to pound that out a little bit just to try to make that even. But I'm even here with this, right about where this turns, where the bulkhead turns there, or the sail plate, that should be about where that is. So I'm going to have a gap down here in the rubber, which you can barely see because the light is terrible. And then it sneaks in a little bit right here at the sill. So, but it's better than it was the last time before I started playing with it, but it's not as good as the driver's side door right now, which is just blows my mind that I was so concerned with the driver's door. Now that it's okay. But anyway, I went about the same process, no surprises. I checked all my hinge point and the nut plate movements, and everything was good. I had a little problem with this hinge up here. I took this bolt out, this top one, and just pivoted on this guy here, and then I wasn't getting full motion with both bolts in, but then I pulled the top one out and I got motion back, and then was able to tighten it back up. So there may be something where you have to pull a bolt completely out to get what you need, and then it'll thread back in. Just kind of one of those things. But so now, like I said, I'm going to move on to the beast here. I'm going to totally reset on the beast. I'm not going to put any mounting, or excuse me, prop hardware anywhere at all. I'm just going to leave that strap on there that's on there right now. But I am going to be removing some pieces parts here, so there's going to have to be some temporary stuff. But I'm going to try to take it down to brass tacks there and reset all of this and move on. So hopefully the doors are now in a good position. I'm happy with where they are. It's not perfect, obviously. I wish I could get the proudness out of that passenger's door there, but it is what it is. And it is at the bottom, and that thing's going to be 4 inches off the ground. You ain't going to see that unless you want to climb on your hands and knees and then go. You're more than welcome to find the mistake at that point. Got the bonnet essentially reset, I guess you could say. I don't have any of the pivot tubes loose, but I pulled the front brackets out, and I also am going to use the same idea with spacers in here. These are about a little over 6 millimeters thick. It's one like regular paint stick and 3 of the little guys that I bought from Walmart's to try to get a good gap there. That gap's a little bit wider than the rest. I also cleaned up all the paint off the hinges, cleaned up some of this stuff. These are one of those clamping things that keep the thing from shrinking in. This was a little bit longer than everything else, so I just trimmed that down a little bit with the angle grinder just to make sure. So now I am going to try to get the bonnet fit without that being really attached to the front of the car, and I'm not sure how well this is going to work, but I want to try to get the mounting points kind of out of the way, so to speak, and see if I can get this thing square and lined up and proper, and then look at the pivot tubes to see how far, if at all, they're off, and then maybe adjust the pivot tubes. Just kind of a backwards approach from the way I did it the first time, I think. So I am just eyeballing it a little bit here, and I got most of the gaps set up properly. Again, nothing's bolted down or anything, so that gap's okay. I still got the rise over here, and I think the rise might be because of that center transverse tube, and I forgot to loosen that guy up. Pretty good over here. You can see this lines up pretty well, and that gap's okay. The bonnet cone, I think, here is a little too high, but let me see. Yeah, the bonnet cone's in there. That's a little too high. The door doesn't sound very well, does it? But now I'm going to look down the center of the hinges, and that one's lined up pretty well in the center. This one, way off. So, hopefully, that tells me that I need to loosen that guy up, the pivot tube itself, and maybe get lucky here and try to slide that over a little bit. But the kicker is, and unfortunately, is I don't, I got to get in and loosen everything. So hopefully I can do that with the car as it sets right here. I should be able to get to everything. So I'm going to loosen that pivot tube up, see if I can center it up eyeball wise in the hinge, and maybe in doing that, that won't put any pressure transmitted down the wing, and hopefully that can help out a little bit here. We'll see. Not perfect, but it's better. So that one's over, not much, 1/16 of an inch or so. That guy, I kind of spread him out a little bit too, so they both tend to move to the outside at least. So squeezing them both in, hopefully will kind of cancel each other out. As a reference point to try to make sure that the bonnet was centered, and then adjust those pivot tubes off the center to try and center them in the brackets as best I could. I used that hole down there in the cross member and the center of the bonnet. Needs to come over just a little bit. And then I also used the line of the wing to the bonnet weld seam along with this of the sail plate. Same thing on the other side to try to kind of line those up, and not too bad. So now I'll slide the hinges back in, the pivot hinges in the front here, and get them in there loosely. I bought all new hardware for that stuff because these bolts are really getting the heck beat out of them, and I wanted to get new nylocks and everything anyway. But I'll use just regular nuts now so I don't destroy the nylocks. And then we'll continue move down the path. I do need to loosen that center transverse tube. I think I'm going to go ahead and do that. I might regret it, but I got to figure out why that one corner over there is rising up. All right, as a little tip here, I propped the bonnet up on a piece of wood just to kind of get it off of the hinge area, because those pivot tubes will get in your way as you try to put the hinge in and everything. So especially with the spacer tubes that are in there, you got to kind of hammer them in sometimes because they're pretty tight, using a drift punch or whatever. So just getting the bonnet out of the way here makes it a lot easier. Show you real quick how to put this pivot tube thing together. You got a little spacer inside there that just kind of rides inside the housing there, and I don't know how many times I forgot to put that in before having to take it back apart. Do everything. You'd want to put both sides of them in here, because as you lower this and you're going to bolt this down, if you don't have that other bushing in there on the other side, you'll have to unbolt it and lift it back up potentially. So just get them both in there. Drop that down in there. Then you have these two like extra thick washers that fit on either side, but on the inside, so they'll go in between the pivot tube and the bracket. And then you got a nice big 3/8 inch, I think it's either 3/8 or 5/16, I don't remember, inch bolt nut combination. And then that has a washer on the outside, just a regular flat washer on the outsides of the whole contraption here. So the first side's oops, and you drop those washers in, sometimes the bonnet, all the time. There's enough space in between in this thing that you can kind of just push it through and get lucky. What you can do here too, and what I'm going to do is, again, stick a piece of wood up in it under here, but use a jack and adjust the height of the bonnet to kind of get in the center here. All right, got the bonnet jacked up here a little bit. Put the hinge kind of in line with the pivot tube just to make it a little easier. The spacers will go in right here. So you set the nut up, washer on the outside, put a spacer on the inside. Goes in nice and easy on here for me. Get that bolt started in there, then I put the other spacer in. Sometimes it's a little loose, sometimes it's a little tight, it all depends on how it lines up. Able to move it with my finger here, and that's it. So now that one's in there, get that washer on the outside, get the nut on there. That's really all there is to it. Can't forget those spacers because you'll crush the hinge. Can't forget the bushing that's inside because it'll flop around on you. And yeah, so now I'm going to go ahead and do the other side, and then we'll see if we can't pull our hair out trying to get it aligned. Got the hinges all in. We'll lift the bonnet up, loosen up that center transverse tube, and see what nastiness that unleashes. Essentially in the same spot that I was before. I don't have this latch adjusted, but that lines up pretty good there. Pretty good across the door, not perfect. I could probably bang this this portion of the bonnet out a little bit. I may do that. And then over here, I'm in the same spot like I said before, but I haven't tightened this part of the transverse tube yet. And I do have a pretty good bump in here. The thing that kind of concerns me is to line this up. Makes it a little bit proud of the door, quite a bit actually. So then my next thought was, well, maybe the sill got sent out a little bit. It sticks out too far, and it's not. It's within 1/10 of an inch of the other side, so much more than the thing looks. And also the door kind of kicks in a little bit. Now maybe that might be about 1/10 of an inch or so. But you know what? So be it. So I'm going to go ahead and use the same method that I did before and just jam some wood spreaders in between the transverse tube and the wing where it attaches, and then tighten it down and set it down. I don't think I'm going to get this rise out of the center either, so there it is. Well, I can't get it any better than it is. I'm essentially in the same place that I was with the bonnet the last time before I tried this all again, so I'm willing to concede that it's as good as I'm going to be able to get it. Now I do need to work on this here, but I'm not going to do that until I get the bonnet back out. I still have some welding to do on it where I cracked it underneath that hinge right there. So I'll wait until I get it out. I'll just match the contour of the door and match that up there. This could come out just a little bit more, but it's not worth messing with. These gaps across the top here are a little wide, and the cap right here is a little wide. But the door is not quite as far forward as it probably needs to be to make the gaps right. But again, I got gaps in the back, and I got the rise in the center. But again, so be it. Happy with it over here. I wish this gap down at the bottom between the sill and the thing was a little bit taller, but it's okay. Happy with the door. Happy with the boot. So I think what I'm going to do right now, it's about 2:30 or so. I'm going to play with some potential solutions to my seats. I have one that in my head that doesn't involve any cutting into the floorboard, so we'll see. I'll try that real quick. Next up will be to mark all this stuff to get my hinge placements all correct and everything, though now I think with a little bit more experience I won't be as brutal to everything, but I still want to get everything marked. So let's see what we can do with this seat rail. So here's the idea with the seat rail. Again, the bolts on the inside, can't see that one because it's underneath, are fine. So my idea was to just essentially bolt a little flange, or not a flange, but a transition piece, I guess you could say, bolt to the existing hole on the seat rail, so that sits on the head of the bolt, and then just move this over with the thing and tap into the existing bolt hole and just screw it down. I didn't drill this one real well. I drilled that one okay. For some reason the seat rail now won't slide back and forth. I think it might be a little crooked. I think I might have it off a little bit, but not incredibly concerned. I took no measurements. I just eyeballed everything. So it's but I think this can work. If you guys have a different opinion of this, pretty consigned to the fact that if I get into a big enough accident where I'm worried about the seat coming off, I'm probably dead anyway. So I'm not incredibly concerned about an accident causing the seat to come apart, because I think that will be horrific anyway. But if you guys think that this won't work, give me a comment, please. And otherwise, I think I'll try to make this fancy and take some measurements and actually get it attached this way. That way, I don't have to cut anything. I can use existing bolts and be calling it good. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. Next up, getting everything back off, doing a couple of repairs, and getting her in paint. Have a good rest of your weekend. Cheers.